So I've reacted and responded to a lot of Russell Brand stuff already, because I feel like his position is a dangerous one, considering how much reach and how much support that he has, and the kind of things that he says and the kind of narratives that right. And in the first segment I did on Russell Brand, he's talked about the World Economic Forum. Now, World Economic Forum at this point basically has become like the universal boogeyman for middle class people who feel like they should be doing better in life than they are. Like it's peak 10% versus the 1%, whilst forgetting about the 89% or whatever. In that when they can't become a landlord, or when thing like markets where they could start being more bourgeois, get more kind of entrenched within the capitalist class, because that's just how capital markets function. When they're not regulated, they become monopolies, and they feel like they can't be a fault of the system. It has to be some kind of shadow entity that's stopping me from being the boot, stopping me from giving me the opportunity of being like part of kind of the boot class, I guess, at this point, really. These middle class people, they can't just blame capitalism because they're all fucking capitalists themselves and they want to be capitalists. They have to imagine some group of conspiracists who are deliberately undermining the perfect system that they were brought up in, and that they told them they could be nice little special boys and girls to become rich landlord types or whatever. Um, and so that's why it's a really big conspiracy at this point, because it's the centralization of power. Even capitalists, even old school capitalists, are being incredibly skeptical about the centralization of power amongst these kind of institutions. When instead of thinking about it like some kind of spooky cabal, like they televise their meetings, right? Like if they were trying to remain under the radar, why would they televise the meetings that they have? Um, you look at the system from a materialist perspective and just say, well, the profit motive makes it such that, and also just capitalism in general is structured such that there is a divide between the bourgeoisie and proletariat. There you go, I'm being all fucking Marxoid at this point, right? And such that these um groups, these classes with opposing interests, will want to take every action that they can to be able to advance their class interests overall. That's why unions exist, why the Chamber of Commerce exists, and it's why the World Economic Forum exists. And it exists because like huge companies like Amazon, Apple, all Intel, all the Microsoft, all these companies, they have these huge corporations have similar class interests, and the World Economic Forum exists to be able to fight for those class interests. It's not exactly an incredibly difficult concept to be able to wrap your head around, but unfortunately, when you fully have internalized the idea of capitalism, and internalized the idea of markets, and internalized the idea of the quote unquote meritocracy that's supposed to exist, if you don't make it and you feel like you should, instead of blaming the system, that you need there to be some kind of unscrupulous actor who's manipulating it behind the scenes. When really that's just how these things have always functioned, and they've always centralized over time. And this is a nature of the way in which global markets function as well. So it's very similar to how the World Bank and IMF operate, with the way in which they engage in economic imperialism to be able to move more countries in the global south to the overall kind of no neoliberal agenda and things like that. So to again, this weird conspiracy that they have, I really don't. I really have take a pretty kind of dull eye to. Now, Russell Brand has been talking about the World Economic for a long time, mainly in these kind of within this kind of narrative. He doesn't talk about them in the way that he talks about a lot of other issues. So when the last segment of his that I watched was about food prices and how monopolization on the part of the profit motive behind these companies that own huge amounts of farmland, for example, in the United States, are the people who have allowed the food prices to go up because they have so much of a power, so much control over that market that they can afford to, because it's within their interest to be able to make as much money as possible. Because when it's something like food where you can't not eat, you have to eat or you die, they can afford to put the prices up because it means people prioritize it higher, because it's one of the bottom of the pyramid, bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Same goes with housing, same goes with energy. The marketization of these particular things have allowed them to be controlled by small amounts of people for large amounts of profit, because the supply demand curve is incredibly elastic. But for some reason, he doesn't do this the with the World Economic Forum and the quote unquote Great Reset, which really is just Great Reset was what they called. It's just a way of being able to humanize capitalism to people or make it look less fucking evil, which it predominantly is, even though the World Economic Forum are. It's essentially just a capitalism branding exercise, rather than what people like Russell Brand and his conspiracy theory friends seem to think it is some kind of weird agenda to control the world. Which I find pretty fucking weird and embarrassing that they kind of say these things. But Russell Brand isn't doing this, I think, because he genuinely believes that there's this shadowy cabal. He's just fucking drunk on the fame. He knows what people want to hear. He knows what people want, what he can say to be able to get people on board with him. Because it's very, very clear that the people who watch his channel are the types who would be taken in by this World Economic Forum stuff. People who genuinely believe in capitalism but feel like it's being undermined by unscrupulous actors rather than any kind of inherent externality of the system itself. Anyway, the video that I'm going to react to is called Proof the Great Reset is Happening in Capitals. So we'll see what evidence he has for this, which is probably from Reclaim the Net or some other nebulous libertarian type site that he frequents pretty frequently. Anyway, let's watch it. Let's see what he has to say.
Bloody farmers protesting, hating the environment. What is it? Are farmers all bastards? Or are we seeing the beginning of the Great Reset play out in real time? And to check whether or not that's a reality or a conspiracy theory, because we can never be sure, let's check what Klaus Schwab, the inventor of the Great Reset, which is something that he says himself, said in 2020.
We have to prepare for a more angry world.
Why? Why have we got to prepare for a more angry world? What's going to happen, Klaus? Like, that's going to make the world more angry? We shouldn't be preparing for that. We should be trying to prevent it. We should be thinking about ways to share resources, empower ordinary people, coming to terms with the fact that some people identify in very progressive ways, some people identify in traditional ways, that the globalist culture is being rejected by everybody, that people are feeling disempowered, that no one trusts the agenda of these globalists, that when they say...
So what does he mean by globalist? Does he mean Jews? Because lots of people mean Jews when they say globalist. What he really should be talking about is global markets. Like, I've heard Marxists describe things as being quote-unquote globalist in nature, which you shouldn't be. Like, if you're a Marxist, you shouldn't be calling things globalist, like, because when they mean globalist, they mean similar to what we mean when we say internationalists. But what it actually should be around is about the kind of the global kind of free market hegemony, which is being used to be able to rinse the third world, right? That's what we really should be, we really should be attacking, rather than the idea of having, a more interconnected world overall between the global north and the global south. But I digress. Even so, again, he's talking like a conspiracy theorist, where it's all about some kind of secret agenda rather than just the natural state of the profit motive, right?
We're doing this for climate change, they don't believe them. That when they say we're doing this because we want equality between races or genders or sexualities, don't believe them. It's all demonstrative. It's all phatic, SATs trickery to prevent ordinary people getting on with their lives and to further centralise corporate power and to make sure that the state operates essentially as the henchmen for corporate interests.
And
I mean, that's actually the first time that I've heard him describe it in that nature, right? But again, why are they trying to do that? Why are they trying to centralize the power? Is it because they're evil? Is it because they're secretly super villains or whatever? No, it's because they want money. The profit motive decides that the money is what matters, and then they use their power to be able to make more money. It's very simple.
how to prepare, it means to take the necessary action.
Necessary action could mean lockdowns. Necessary action could mean that we're going to say to the agricultural industry, you can't use these fertilizers anymore. And that might impact the livelihood of these farmers. And they're probably only using these fertilizers anyway, because it's the only effective way to turn a profit with the conditions and stipulations that are placed on their industry as a result of other regulations, probably that have come from the WEF.
But regulations are good. Regulations are a good thing if they lead to positive outcomes, right? Rather than again, he's taking the right-wing framing of just saying, well, regulations equals bad. Well, no. Regulations are bad if they're bad and good if they're good, right? If the regulations have positive outcomes, then they're good ones. If they have negative outcomes, then they're not good ones. Like, with regards to fertilizers, I think that's one of the times when we have seen, look at the externalities that we've seen from, the fertilizer changes in Sri Lanka that's led to a massive uprising as people have basically gone hungry as all the crops have died, right? That's an idea where maybe, sure, this particular regulation is bad, but the idea that any amount of market regulation is bad, that's just incredibly right-wing framing of this issue from someone who purports himself to be incredibly left-wing.
Or some other globalist-funded body that controls what used to be national...
Just say capitalist. You don't mean globalist, Russell. You mean capitalist.
Or even local interests. These kind of things come at a cost.
I don't have too many remedies. The remedies have to be discussed through dialogue by the stakeholders of our global system.
Yeah, who are the stakeholders of the global system? That means like corporate power, state power. These are the stakeholders. In a sense, all of...
Well, I mean, that's not true. Like, when Klaus Schwab is talking about stakeholders, he's talking about a nebulous idea that he created. There's a really good video that Tom Nicholas did about Johnny Harris shilling for the World Economic Forum, talking about this idea of stakeholder capitalism, which is by changing from the current model, where everything is basically decided by the interest of the shareholders and the dividends they end up getting paid out, to a more nebulous idea of stakeholder capitalism, where corporations think about the environment and think about the state and they think about this and think about that. Again, it's just a project to whitewash and humanize capitalism rather than actually attack the underlying systems about it that cause all of these negative externalities. That's the real issue, right? Stakeholder capitalism is a nonsense framing, but unfortunately Russell's not done any research on Klaus Schwab, or not done any research on the things that he actually says and does to understand what he means by that, right? So that's what Klaus Schwab is talking about when he says stakeholders, right? But what Russell should be saying, instead of saying this is what he means by this word, he should be saying, well, forget whatever, fucking optics that Klaus Schwab is trying to spin. Let's talk about the underlying systems at play, the underlying incentive structures that are at play, rather than just assuming that there's just evil people doing bad things, which is an incredibly fucking simplistic take.
This, you will own nothing and you will be happy. You're not going to eat meat anymore. You're going to...
That's not a real phrase. I discussed it in the last video where it was just a offhand comment by someone, someone at some point basically saying that could be a future of new things where lots of things are on subscription models. I digress. I mean, it's not a good thing. I hate subscription models. I hate the rentier economy. But the idea that this is like the founding kind of tenet of the Great Reset is just not true.
Going to eat insects. We start to see the consequences of it. You can watch the Great Reset video. It tells you what the plan is. You're not going to own anything. How's that going to happen? Well, we're going to own it. You're not going to be eating meat anymore. How come? Because we're shutting down all the farms. Like, I'm a vegan person, so I don't eat meat. And if it was up to me, then less people would eat meat. In fact, no people would eat meat. But guess what? It ain't up to me. It's up to you what you do with your life. Perhaps in the political space, if we chose, instead of enforcing rules, we could persuade people of our opinion and our views. And maybe people go,
can you show me any footage of this, Russell, so that we understand what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the way
what you're referring to, whether you're not just like, I don't know,
I want to live, or we've come to some kind of compromising consensus, because that's how we are evolved to live. We're not evolved to live in accordance with top-down edicts. We're communal, social animals that are supposed to create regulation among one another through consensus.
But
I mean, that is true. That is a very good point, right? So it's necessary to be able to have a functioning democracy, but unfortunately, we have a fucking dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and everything is done with the interests of capital because capital has cultural hegemony. Fucking boring Marxist shit, but you know what I mean.
I just see the need for such a dialogue.
I see the need for speed. This Top Gun Maverick film is doing so well. Oh, maybe I could be the new goose. I'm going to unbutton my shirt now. Now we are on a highway to the danger zone. And that's why I need you all to be locked in your house and take these necessary medicines. It's a...
Did he say that? I'm not sure where Russell's getting this from. Like, it is obviously just corporate speak of just like, we need to talk to people, we need to do dialogue. Have you seen like me saying the good things, fucking puff piece or whatever? But Russell's strange, pretty deranged.
Danger zone!
And I see the need for action.
He's only right about one thing. There is anger coming. The way that I've seen most of these stories relayed on the mainstream media suggests that the farmers are kind of agitators that just want to use really bad toxic fertilizer for a laugh, man. But actually, when you dig a little deeper into this story, you start to reckon...
The problem is the farmers they're like owner operators. They're all kind of bourgeois entities, right? A bunch of people are like going, based protests, and these are fucking people with bourgeois interests, right? Why do you care?
Nice. That they're having their rights eroded, they're having their livelihood taken away, and that the agenda of the WEF, the globalists, is not even to have a more organic and
they're not globalists, they're capitalists.
Ecologically responsible farming system. No, that's simply what they're saying. Their objective is what's going to happen. The farmers will be bankrupted and their land will be purchased by centralised monocultural forces. That's what will happen. You can sometimes tell what is intended.
I don't necessarily think that wouldn't happen. That's not down to the regulation that the Dutch government is doing, which is explicitly in an ecological capacity, right? So I don't know why you're linking the farmers' protest, which is about a dispute between the Dutch government and a bunch of different independent farming owner operators, and Klaus Schwab's idea of changing things through corporate and state power. I don't know what he's talking about.
By what actually happens. Forget what they're saying. Look at what's happening. What's happening? Oh, farmers are all losing their farms. Oh, who's buying up those farms and who's buying up that land? Is anyone?
Thing is, what's usually with Russell Brand is usually has sources that he quotes, like from articles, whatever, and you can find the link or whatever. But here he's just saying, they're all going to lose their farms and all their livelihoods. I mean, are they? Source? I guess I'll just fucking Google it. The TLDR video about the truck farmers protest didn't specifically say that.
Anyone famous who you hear about in the news buying up a lot of farmland at the moment?
Bill Gates has been snatching up 242,000 acres of farmland across the US, enough to make him the top private.
But not the Netherlands. Like, the issue, and Russell Brand was correct in his video critiquing what's happening with the monopolization of farmland in the United States was incredibly correct. And Bill Gates, people who have huge amounts of capital to be able to throw around and use that capital to be able to outbid other people, to be able to create monopolies. Again, that's just one of the failures of unregulated markets, right? And it's going to take state power to regulate those markets, which is odd that he's just not talking about them. But, I digress. But that's not what the farmers' protest is about.
Private farmland owner in America.
What would it enable people to buy up yet more farmland? I suppose if farmers were all broke, they'd start selling their farmland. Oh, and how can we make farmers broke without seeming like we're doing the evil bidding of a Bond villain? Say that they have to change to a fertiliser that won't be cost effective and not give them an interim period to make those adjustments, not achieve a kind of consensus between the market or consumers, as we're commonly known, that we will purchase organic product over a period of time. These kind of things have to be achieved democratically, consensually, with the involvement of the farming community and the whole population. They can't be top down.
The farming, what you have two groups of people with entirely differing material interests. Farmers, especially the owner, people who own the farms and the owner operators of farms, these people, their main material interest is profit. Unfortunately, so much of the profit motive is taken up by the fact that it does not gel well with the idea of creating a hospitable planet. And unfortunately, these things are going to have to change. But the Dutch government making changes for ecological reasons is not the same as the World Economic Forum or Bill Gates buying up a bunch of farmland. These are two completely separate issues.
Edicts that come from Klaus Schwab, unless the intention, of course, is not to make the farmers ecologically sound, but to make the farmers economically broke. Often we have to make this transition from thinking we're dealing with
this is just fucking conspiracy theory. There's like, if, for example, there was some kind of evidence that you could show me that A, all the farmers were going to go broke because of the new Dutch regulations, and B, that it was instrumental for the World Economic Forum collaboration with the state in the Netherlands, 100% I'd believe you, 100%. But you've just produced no evidence for this.
Conspiracy, because a lot of the time it sounds like a conspiracy. Oh no, there's no Great Reset happening. But Klaus Schwab talks about the Great Reset openly. When people say that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, you have to check to see if there are policies being instantiated that lead to that kind of conclusion. So what we're seeing in all of these various trucker protests, agricultural protests in Sri Lanka or the Netherlands...
These are all fucking... the Sri Lanka and... this is the complete opposite. So the reason why people in Sri Lanka are rioting is because the people are literally going hungry. The country is starving because of economic collapse, because of an issue with the ability of agriculture to be able to function with the way in which fertilizers are being, the way the fertilizer got over-regulated in a bad way, right? And second of all, because the government cut taxes before a price shock during COVID, and it literally made them default on their debt. These are two completely separate issues. And again, the Sri Lanka issue has nothing to do with the fucking World Economic Forum. Like, by all means, critique the overall power structure in Sri Lanka, which is essentially a fucking like a nepotistic dynasty of the Rajapaksas, right? By all means, but that's nothing to do with you'll own nothing and be happy from the World Economic Forum.
Land, or in Germany, I believe there are comparable protests, is an uprising.
And again, it's uniquely bourgeois interests that super care about this, right? People who own farms, people who own trucking companies, right? It's these bourgeois people who are kicking up a shit fit about the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum because they want to be the 1%. They want to be the boot, right? It's interesting how Russell never talks about any of the proletariat when he talks about any of this, or do they just not matter to you, Russell?
Of people that are being dispossessed and disempowered because of globalist edicts, and then the media portrays those uprisings
not gonna say it
as problematic or as racist or unnecessary or ecologically unsound because their institutional biases are shared with the people that are set to gain.
The United States has appealed to Sri Lanka's politicians to act promptly to resolve their country's economic crisis.
The protests in Sri Lanka are comparable as well. The Sri Lankan farmers are responding again to globalist edicts.
No, it's not farmers. It's the whole fucking population because they're literally dying because they can't afford to eat. There's fucking... people are starving because they can't get food. People can't travel to work because there's no fuel, right? It's total economic collapse. It's not just the farmers, right? Which, to be fair, they're getting a pretty bad deal out of it, right? And especially when it's not just the crops that they're growing, but the biggest export in Sri Lanka is tea, Ceylon tea, and the tea crops are actually dying as well. It's not just individual farmers. It's not just farming companies. It's whole swathes of the economy have been essentially destroyed by the fact that they can no longer function properly. It's not the government trying to put them out of business.
top-down economic policies that are being brought about in their country without any consent. These are legitimate protest movements, but to acknowledge their legitimacy means to recognise the illegitimacy of the globalist order. That can never happen. So therefore you have to disavow these kind of protests, because otherwise the momentum will start to gather. You'll start to notice, hang on a minute, the truckers, the people in Sri Lanka protesting right now, the people in the Netherlands. Wait a second.
So you've got one set of truckers who are a bunch of owner-occupiers who didn't want to get fucking vaccinated, you know, to be able to, you know, adhere to the social contract. You've got a bunch of farmers who don't want to lose out on revenue because they might have to take out more expensive farm prices, and then comparing that to a literal fucking civil revolt in Sri Lanka because people are dying. I don't think it's a comparable, Russell.
We all have the same interest. What if we were to, dude, cut it out, cut it out?
No, they don't have the same fucking interest. They don't have the same fucking interest at all. The owner operators of the farmers and the truckers, they want to, like, the truckers they just didn't want to get fucking vaccinated for some reason. There's an incredibly small minority. Even the fucking unions didn't support them, right? And the farmers in the Netherlands, they just want to keep making money. They don't want their profit margins to be impacted by having to take up slightly more ecologically friendly processes. Again, you've not shown me any kind of link between the World Economic Forum and the governing party in the Netherlands at the moment. You've not done any of that, right?
Because the alternative would be to intervene against the interests of the powerful.
Burning fury for all to see.
The only thing that actually impacts the interest of the powerful is proletarian revolt. It is the people who have no power, who sell their labor, whose main interest is being able to survive, be able to meet their material needs through, you know, I know, something like selling their labor power, right? Those are the people who really, and not the people who might make a little less profit from all those means of production that they own.
Burning fury, those Sri Lankan bastards burning stuff down simply because they're...
No one's saying that. Chat, people in the future, YouTube comments, Russell Brand, find me literally anybody who is demonising the Sri Lankan protesters. I fucking double, triple dare you. Everyone understands. Everyone sympathises with the Sri Lankan protesters. And the reason why they do, because it's a genuine civil revolt in which everybody in the country is being affected, rather than the truckers or the farmers, which is a very tiny minority of bourgeois people are getting, you know, throwing their toys out the pram that they might have to adhere to some kind of social contract.
being made poor.
The Sri Lankan Prime Minister's house set alight. Flames fueled by protesters' anger.
Anger, flames, bastards. How many more times?
What? I don't know where you're reading that this is the attitude of the BBC towards this. I don't know what where you're getting any of this from, Russell.
Why won't people just do what Klaus Schwab suggests?
At economic
Why would the BBC be in line with Klaus Schwab? They're a public broadcaster.
management that's
Which
left
are independent from the government.
many suffering.
Suffering bastards.
The president's office was also stormed.
If you're just a person that watches the news, the impression you're going to have is fucking Sri Lankans are bastards, aren't they? Why can't they leave their
No? What fucking planet do you live on, Russell? That makes no fucking sense.
president alone in his office? What's the point of a president?
That's how literally every single one of these things has been reported on. I think if you ask me, maybe I'm all here on my own. I'm the only person who has this analysis of that particular news report that he's showing. But it sounds to me like every other news report of these things was just like, things have gotten so bad, oh dear, like Adam Curtis would say, right? Things have gotten bad and we have to take a somber tone because, you know, clearly there's issues going on at play here, rather than taking a side. That's just how it looks like to me. But maybe I'm fucking wrong.
What's the point of a presidential office? What's the point of any democratic institution? It's meant to be to service the ordinary people of that nation. Because that agenda has been abandoned and replaced with corporate interests, you know that, you don't need me to tell you, they have to portray the protesters as some sort of lunatics ransacking a palace and knocking over what looked like a very expensive ornamental elephant.
There was an impromptu pool party.
Impromptu pool party! Spring break! Come on, back to work on the farm. You ain't got a farm anymore. Carry on with...
They're not farmers. They're just not all farmers. Like, most of them are just members of the fucking community, of the fucking population, who can't live because they fucking starve. They can't eat a square meal. It's a fucking. This is not like, they should be really pointed that there's a difference between the protests that you talk about on one end and the fucking civil revolt in Sri Lanka.
the swimming then!
It's rumoured the president's taken to the high waters as his country finds itself politically and economically all at sea.
I mean, in a sense, is there an image that more beautifully sums up the problems that we face than members of the Sri Lankan population reclaiming a swimming pool? They shouldn't be in his swimming pool. I bet one of them done a wee.
They've not said that or implied that. This is This is fucking schizo posting.
Lucky there's not that special dye in there, what shows if you've done a wee, then the president would know for sure what person's wee it was.
It's time that we got all our stolen money back to this country. And also the air conditions are running in that presidential palace while people don't have electricity in their homes.
That's like the whole experience of ransacking. You fucking bastards! This palace is fantastic! The air conditioning, them ornamental elephants, they've got a fucking swimming pool! You told us there's no money to pay for our fucking food here! So this is what's been happening in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is in a last-ditch effort to stave off economic collapse
Daily Caller.
after an allegedly climate-friendly ban on artificial fertilisers. You've got to have these fertilisers.
They're not going Daily Caller aren't going to mention the tax cut, are they?
Okay then, otherwise you won't be...
Like, the ban on artificial fertilizers did cause a lot of the food shortages and the lack of export revenue and things like that. But there was also the huge raft of tax cuts that were done just before the pandemic that also led to them defaulting on their sovereign debt, which led to the actual economic collapse.
Yeah, meet your targets. So we'll do what we have to do. Oh, them fertilisers, they're fucking everything up. Right, we're shutting your farm down, but you told it, wait, you bastards. Wait, don't kick our van. That's our van. That was bought with taxpayers' money. Well, isn't that our money? Shut up, you bloody racist. Ban on artificial fertilisers
Racist? What?
one of the country's largest industries, according to experts. So what they do is they say, we have to ban this fertiliser, it's ecologically unsound. Now, we, on this channel, believe that we should be respectful to the earth. We believe that corporations should be taken into account. We believe in responsible energy wherever possible, but we believe in all of these things for the benefit of ordinary people, not for the benefit of centralised power, not for the benefit of corporations. And when these...
But you've not shown or demonstrated at all that these were specifically done with the interest of centralized power, right? Maybe, I guess, if I was going to hazard a guess, the Rajapaksas might have wanted some kind of vanity project about how specifically ecologically friendly Sri Lanka was compared to the rest of the subcontinental nations, something like that. I'd buy that. But to say that for some reason like the World Economic Forum is involved, or that they were just going to come in and swoop and buy all the farms once the fertilizer's been changed, that's fucking conspiracy shit. I'm sorry.
kind of rules are used to screw over ordinary people in Sri Lanka, the Netherlands, or the truckers. Can you see how it's always safe?
Again, these are not linked.
It's always convenience. They always come to your door with a promise. We're going to make things easier for you. We have to help the planet. We have to help the children. What's the result of all this help? Get your help off of me. A ban on chemical fertilizers implemented April 2021 in an effort to promote organic farming proved the final straw after a string of missteps. Even here it's saying in an effort to promote organic farming. Now, even if, like me, you're sympathetic to the idea of organic farming and even think that organic farming would be a step in the right direction, you have to recognise that organic farming is not the desired endpoint. The displacement of the people is the desired endpoint. The disempowerment of the farmers, the bankruptcy of the farmers is the desired endpoint. That's what's, oh no, we were just trying to create some organic farms. Look what's happened. We've fucked. You've
not demonstrated. This is conspiracy. This is conspiracy shit. It's just schizo conspiracy shit, Russell. You've not demonstrated this at all.
Cut the livelihood of all these ordinary people. It's not a mistake. They're trying to fuck up ordinary people. When I spoke to Vandana Shiva the other day, she explained that there's a philosophical idea underneath it that's even more dastardly. The idea that nature itself is a problem, that our connection to nature is a problem, that we need to become entirely rationalised, entirely mechanised. And if the consequences of that is like Sri Lankan farmers are screwed, Dutch farmers are screwed, Canadian truckers are screwed, German farmers are screwed, then that don't matter. That's part of the desired result. It's not a side effect, it's the intention.
Canadian truckers were throwing a temper tantrum about a vaccine, Russell. Fuck off.
Think how often regulatory action negatively impacts ordinary people and benefits already powerful elites. Look at what happened in the last 2 years.
The vast majority of the time, the complete opposite is true. Why are you peddling this fucking right-wing shit, Russell? You tell everybody you're left-wing, and you're here saying, oh, actually, regulation's bad because it hurts normal people. No. The reason why we have a functioning economy and a functioning system is that there is at least some level of state power which is used to regulate, the interests of the bourgeois. Right? And the social democratic consensus is why we have actually functioning societies within, like Central and Northern Europe. It's so incredibly obvious that he's just grifting to a right-wing audience here. Literally just saying the buzzwords, globalists, but regulations equals bad, World Economic Forum nonsense. It's a huge red flag for me when this pal continues talking about the truckers when trucking and labour groups were against the... Exactly. There was an incredibly small minority of those truckers, in Canada specifically, who were just doing it because they didn't want... They were specifically anti-vaccine, right? I mean, there were some truckers that were there, but what they were owner-operators, right? Rather than, genuine members of the proletariat, actual employees, right? The actual the Teamsters was the union, I think it was against, explicitly against the protest. Then obviously, then there was the Freedom Convoy, which, as you said, was a bunch of MAGA turds in pickup vans who drive around the US protesting against vaccines and also a bunch of other stuff that they didn't even know what they were talking about. There's a good Channel 5 video talking to a bunch of the trucker protesters. They were delusional and they had no idea what they were protesting against.
The richest people in the world got richer. The richest institutions in the world got richer. There was the biggest wealth transfer in history. Oh, what a weird coincidence.
Yeah, that's nothing to do with too much regulation. The reason why there's the biggest transfer of wealth in history is because that's how neoliberalism fucking functions. The regulated markets and the push towards putting things into the control of the private sector. That's what's caused this transfer of wealth, because the neoliberal governments of right-wing parties do not spend enough time engaging in wealth redistribution post-pandemic. There's a really good Gary's economics video about how the rich essentially got much richer off the back of a bunch of the money printed during the pandemic, especially in the UK during furlough.
Ordinary people really, really suffered. Health services suffered. Ordinary folk experienced suffering on an unprecedented scale. But some weird, unexpected side effect that was really beneficial for big pharma and big tech. Oh, well, never mind. Try not to observe a connection between those two things. I'm not saying that the pandemic was a plandemic or it was imposed or it's not true or coronavirus isn't a thing. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm not interested in crazy conspiracy theories or even...
Unless it's about deliberately trying to starve the population of Sri Lanka so the World Economic Forum can buy your farms.
Unsubstantiated and potentially true ideas, because what is demonstrable, what's there in black and white, is sufficient to show that there is a globalist agenda. It doesn't need to be thought about or talked about in shady.
You've not demonstrated this. Again, it just shows his shift to the from the left to the right, when his explicit point here is defending the bourgeoisie against like the corporate elite, right? Rather than, I don't know, defending the proletariat, members of the 90% rather than the 10%. Come on, get a fucking grip, Russell.
Terms, you can see Klaus Schwab saying it for himself. Why can't you Sri Lankan farmers be a little more like ExxonMobil? It's been weeks now since they've done an oil spill, but look at you with that stinky fertilizer. What's that made of? Cow's poops? You're putting me on the highway to the danger zone.
I just see the need for such a dialogue.
I see the...
It's just derangement. It's just actual derangement. World Economic Forum derangement syndrome.
Need for speed. Shall I take my top off again? Please, Klaus, leave it on.
And I see the need for action.
But anyway, perhaps we are conspiracy theories. Maybe there is no intention to do a great reset. It's probably something that's been made up by some nutter...
You've not even shown us what the Great Reset even is, right? You've made a couple of reasonable points about the monopolization of farmland in the United States specifically, right? But that's nothing to do with there's nothing to do with ecological regulations from the state. That's just to do with the fact that people who have huge amounts of capital can use capital for leverage to be able to create monopolies. That has always happened in capitalism and always will happen in capitalism. Your enemy is capitalism, Russell, but you're continually shilling for bourgeois interests because you're a fucking hack.
In a tinfoil hat in their bedroom who still lives with their mum. Let's see what Klaus says.
I see the need for a great reset.
Well, there you have it. Whether it's a conspiracy theory or a stark reality, it seems that what we have is a global response to a globalist agenda that's been explicitly stated by the WEF. All these farmers' protests are happening for a reason. The reason...
But you've shown a clip from a bit where he's just talking about the integrated dialogue around more ecological policies to benefit the quote-unquote stakeholders in his weird fucking capitalism puff piece, right? Without properly actually... assessing any of the kind of prescriptions that he's made no prescriptions, and second of all, without actually attacking the underlying thing, which is capitalism and the profit motive, right? Rather than, again, it has to be a conspiracy rather than a structural issue, because people can't comprehend a structural issue.
Is that the agricultural industry is being unduly pressured under the auspices of ecological advancement, when in fact economic displacement is the real agenda. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Yeah, it is what you're thinking. It's a bunch of absolute fucking bollocks. It's conspiracy nonsense there to be able to protect the 10%. I'm sorry, it is. You've not demonstrated anything there. Like, I'm as critical of the existence of the World Economic Forum as anybody, because they just exist to be able to, essentially a lobby group for the interests of the hugest corporations in the world, right? To be able to, make sweetheart deals with members of governing parties to be able to get favourable conditions for the largest businesses in the world. But the very few kind of actual examples or sources that you're trying to cite here about the way in which this is being seen in the real world have nothing to do with it. They have nothing to do with the World Economic Forum, and it's incredibly, telling that it is people like owners of, literal bourgeois, that you feel like you have the need to feel like you want to defend, rather than the literal global proletariat, right? Because that's the kind of people he's speaking to. Middle class picket fence types who want to be able to see themselves as the 1% in the future, rather than the actual mass of people who actually have to toil in the fields. And he's not provided anything here. It's just a bunch of made up conspiracy bullshit to be able to pander to an increasingly right wing audience. That the system's fine. Nothing in the system's failed. The issue is the fact that there's just an evil cabal trying to rig things from the outside, rather than a system that is fundamentally broken. And thank you very much for watching, future YouTube viewers. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you would like to support the channel, if you want to click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and like and comment, all that good jazz helps in the algorithm. And if you go into the description box down below, you can follow me on my Twitch and my socials, which is where I stream and where I talk about stuff on the internet. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you on the next one.